Now, I'll be moving on to talk about the Ukraine's economic background. So first, we will start with GDP fluctuations. So Ukraine's GDP growth has been very volatile. So this can be seen in an average growth rate of 1.23% of Ukraine's GDP. The 2023 peak of 19.20 was the highest, followed by a historical low of negative 37.20% in 2022. The country's economy has been subject to external influences such as internal dynamics, leading to diverse outcomes over the years. Despite facing these ups and downs, Ukraine's GDP showed a significant increase in 2021. So next we'll move on to inflation changes. So what is this about? So the country faced high inflation rate averaging 14.1% until 2022. Inflation surged to 20.1%, impacting consumer purchasing power. Notably, the inflation rate spread to 20.1% in 2022. This is marking a substantial surge from previous year and underscoring the challenges faced by the economy in the country. This steep increase in inflation has reverted through the economy. Next, we move on to unemployment trends. So unemployment rate varied across the decade and unemployment rate has been fluctuated depending on economic conditions. So while reaching an all-time low of 5% in 2021, the high emigration persisted of youth and unemployment in the labour market. So this structural deficiency in those areas made it worse with high unemployment rate and low labour participation among women and unbalanced skill supplies. Now, we move on to the next factor, which is migration. Ukrainian immigrants have been a significant trend in the economy, sending cash back home to support their family and businesses. This has averaged to USD 16 billion annually in 2019, accounting for over 10% of our country GDP. However, I think this mass labour migration have negatively impacted the economy, leading to increased price and decreased growth in several key sectors. So next is shifting trade balance. In the last 10 years, Ukraine's balance of trade has changed rather dynamically, eventually showing the problems of the country's economics and shift on the global level. In 2022, the country's trade deficit reached 10.86 billion USD, with 65% used for import and rest for domestic consumption. Import to export disparities have impacted Ukraine's money stability. Last but not least, we'll see about the foreign exchange. Trade balance impacts the foreign exchange by influencing supply and demand on currency. Trade deficits indicate imports over export, necessitating international payments in foreign currencies. Countries like US experienced trade deficits while Ukraine's exchange rate was adjusted by 25% in July 2022 due to the war and greenback strengthening. So therefore, I think future exchange rate may be impacted by events such as the Russian attack currently happening towards Ukraine.
My name is Nazatul Nazira binti Shamsuddin and my metric number is 286029. So today I'm going to talk about Ukraine's government and politics. Ukraine has a shared political system. This means that both the president and prime minister have power to run the country together. They each do different jobs to make decisions. For a long time, no single political party had control of parliament by itself, so parties had to work together in coalitions to govern. But in 2019, things changed. One party called Servant of the People won more seats, allowing them to rule alone for the first time. There have also been some big events that changed how Ukraine is governed. In 1991, they became independent from Russia. Then in 2004 and 2014, People Power Revolution happened that removed leaders and made Ukraine look more to Europe. Ukraine still faces problems of political instability or not being stable and violence from conflicts even today. This impacts its relations with other countries who it relies on for support. In the end, to understand Ukraine's politics, we see they share leadership roles, had coalitions, but now one party rules and have transformed through people power but still deal with instability issues.
Ukraine has faced several significant financial challenges over the past decade, especially in 2014, 2019 to 2020, and 2022. The major reason financial crisis happened in 2014 is because of Euromaidan protests in late 2013 and annexation of Crimea by Russians. Ukraine GDP is contracted by 6.6% in 2014 and 9.8% in 2015, reflecting the deep economic recessions. In response to the crisis, the International Monetary Fund approved a 4-year extended fund facility program in March 2015. amounting to $17.5 billion. This program aimed at restoring growth and reducing vulnerability of Ukraine. Next, by 2019, the election of president introduced political uncertainty, and conflict in eastern Ukraine continued to drain resources and hinder economic recovery. Additionally, Ukraine's public debt remained high, with the debt to GDP ratio is around 50% by the end of 2019. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic led to widespread economic disruption globally, and Ukraine was no exception. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, the International Monetary Fund approved a new 18-month standby arrangement worth $5 billion to help Ukraine address the pandemic economic impact. Furthermore, the financial crisis of Ukraine in 2022 was primarily driven by the Russian invasion that began in February. The destruction of infrastructure, disruption of industrial production, and mass displacement of people caused the GDP to shrink significantly. Recovery is expected to take at least a decade. In March 2022, the International Monetary Fund approved $1.4 billion in emergency financing under the Rapid Financing Instrument to address urgent balance of payment needs while helping stabilize the Ukraine economy.
Next, I will continue with internal conflict and the impact. The internal conflict is about national security, which is the war in Donbass. This conflict began from the root of the Donbass conflict burrowed deep into 2014 after Russia annexed Crimea. Pro-Russian sentiment in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, especially in Donetsk and Luhansk, ignited a rebellion. Separatists seized the government building, declared independence, and began the region into war against Ukrainian government forces. Russia's support to separatists was openly acknowledged, fueling the flames of brutal conflict. Then, in 2015, the Minsk Agreement, a fragile ceasefire without the violation, brought some semblance of peace. However, in February 2022, the fragile peace was shattered. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine caused a devastating escalation in Donbass. This war impacted the global supply chain disrupted. Both Ukraine and Russia are a major agriculture countries that exported their commodities. The conflict has disrupted trade in essential goods like wheat, oil and gas, sunflower oil and vital metals. Manufacturers around the world who rely on these materials face production delay or must find alternative sources at a higher price. This means that consumers will pay more for everything from groceries to electronics and cars.
I'm going to talk about how the war in Ukraine is affecting the country and the whole world. When Russia started fighting Ukraine in February, it causes many problems. Ukraine trades a lot with Russia, so the fighting stopped many businesses. Some companies can't get money and supplies now. This means less money for Ukraine. Energy like oil and gas also got more expensive worldwide because of the war. Ukraine uses a lot of energy from other countries, so it's spending more money on energy now. Everything is getting more expensive. It's also harder for Ukraine to sell things to other places because ports and roads got damaged. This creates shortage of important things inside Ukraine. Ukraine sells a lot of food to other places too, but now it's difficult. Ukraine and Russia provide food to many countries, but the war is making food more expensive everywhere and causing hunger problems. So in summary, the war is affecting Ukraine's economy and trade. It's also impacting energy and food prices around the world. This creates challenge for Ukraine to recover from the fighting. International help is still needed.
Hello, I am Anna Maisara binti Azmi with metric number 288466. Now I will be presenting about Ukraine response to the Palestine conflict, the occupation of Israel. The first one is about the point of view from public and sentiment within Ukraine. At first, most Ukrainian population were sympathetic to Israel's actions. This support was based on the assumption that Ukraine's war with Russia should be equated to the situation. The Ukraine president Volodymyr Zelensky stipulated that he opposed the attacks of Hamas and supported Israel as the self-defense. However, as the conflict expanded and the people of Gaza were suffering with a very intensive way, the society changed its visions and noticed the refugees problem. The images of attack in Gaza made some Ukrainians doubt and expressed disapproval with regard to their government's unmoving pro-Israel stance. Next, the government policies where there were variations in diplomatic moves in Ukraine indicating that the price was slightly more complicated. For example, Ukraine approved the resolution that the UN should refer to the ICJ for the request on an advisory opinion concerning the situation of the occupations. Therefore, internal and external pressures also play a role in the government's approach to the issue. Domestically, there has been a growing controversy in public and academic circles that has influenced the government policy shift on the matter. Internationally, Ukraine relied on Western support in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. Thus, a delicate balancing of support Western policies in spite of Palestine-Israel issue. Lastly, the situation of Israel and Palestine does not bear indirect economic impact on Ukraine. However, political consequences remain apparent. There are tensions within the Ukrainian government and society being critical of other countries for not supporting Israel, for the Ukrainian government to firmly supporting Israel. Conflict has also impacted on relationship that Ukraine has with other countries within Middle East and rest of the Islamic world. The former Soviet and Middle Eastern regions have expressed concern over Ukraine's cooperation with Israel that may pose trouble in its diplomatic ascension and connections. Furthermore, Ukraine as a subject of the international relations, itself experiencing a military conflict, has to deal with inside this unstable and ever-evolving construction of foreign policy relations. That's all from me.